If you're currently in the market for a new camera for videography, you're lucky because there are so many fantastic options out there, but with so many choices, it can be tricky to figure out which camera gives you the most bang for the buck. That's why I'm here to simplify things and show you the top cameras in each price range, along with a few hidden gems you might not expect, but I have a few notes before we get started. First, if you don't see your current camera mentioned, don't worry, it does not mean that it's not a good camera, it's just that the ones we talk about offer better value right now. Second, I've included affiliate links to all the cameras in the description below, so feel free to check them out. It's a great way to support this channel at no extra cost to you. Third, it's December 2025 right now, and most cameras currently available are pretty solid, but new models are always on the horizon, so I will keep the comments updated with new developments, and there is a link in the description to a blog article I regularly update. And fourth, when I talk about categories like mid-range or semi-professional, these are just labels to help organize pricing. Sometimes a lower priced camera can actually be better for your specific needs than a more expensive one, so pay attention to what each camera is actually good at, not just the price tag. And lastly, I won't be covering cinema cameras in this video because if you're a cinematographer, you likely know exactly what you need already. So let's get started and find the perfect camera for you. Starting with the entry-level cameras under $1,000, the models that I recommend are the Sony ZV-E10 and the ZV-E10 Mark II, Fujifilm X-M5, Nikon Z30 and Z50 Mark II, Canon R50, R10 and the new R50V, plus the Canon PowerShot V1 if you want a compact one with a fixed lens. So what do these cameras all have in common? Most are APS-C sensors, and the biggest differences come down to whether you get 8-bit or 10-bit recording, 4K 60 or not. These cameras also don't have IBIS, so they rely on digital stabilization, which crops your image. That's a big deal if you're shooting handheld, unless you use a gimbal or tripod. The only exception here is the Canon PowerShot V1, as this one has integrated lens stabilization, so with all others you would have to use stabilized lenses unless you use a stabilizer. But let me break down the real decision points here. If you want the overall best autofocus, lens ecosystem and great quality, go Sony. The ZV-E10 is often available used or refurbished, and it's decent. You get 4K 30, 1080p in 120 FPS for slow motion and Sony's reliable face tracking, but honestly the rolling shutter is really bad, really bad. If you move the camera too fast, you will see those wobbles everywhere, and that's why the ZV-E10 Mark II is actually better. It fixes most of those issues. You now get 4K 60 and 10-bit 4:2 and S-Log 3, which is amazing for color grading, much better rolling shutter, and you can load LUTs into the camera. It's around $998, and if you care about autofocus and having tons of lens options, this is your best bet in this price range. If you want the best image quality in a tiny package, the Fujifilm X-M5 at $799 to $899 is just stunning. It weighs just 350 grams and can shoot 6.2K open gate. That means you're recording the full sensor height, so you can crop vertical and horizontal content later. And all that in 10-bit 4:2 f-log 2 for fantastic dynamic range, plus Fuji's film simulations make your footage look great straight out of camera. The trade-off? No IBIS, and the autofocus isn't as reliable as Sony's. That's why my advice with Fujifilm cameras is that you should turn face tracking on but eye tracking off, and you will get much better results. But still, there's usually a bit of stepping when you rack focus, so not perfect, but it's a beautiful camera. I personally love it. And talking about Nikon, the Z30 at around $600 and Z50 Mark II offer solid basics, 4K up to 30 frames per second, 120 frames per second slow motion, and Nikon's digital stabilization doesn't crop the image, which I still don't understand how they do that. The Z50 Mark II has 10-bit with N-Log for better dynamic range. A big advantage is that you can adapt a lot of lenses, old Nikon F lenses with the FTZ adapter, plus adapters for Canon EF and Sony E-mount. So if you want flexibility down the road, Nikon's actually worth considering now. And for Canon, the R50 starts at $579 and the R10 is around $999. But But therefore, Canon's new R50 is specifically designed for video and comes at only $569. Great price, and it offers cropped 4K 60 in 10-bit in C-Log3, so you also get a pretty good dynamic range there. They all have Canon's excellent autofocus, and you can adapt cheap used Canon EF lenses with full autofocus, but no IBIS on any of them, and C-Log3 gives you a bit less dynamic range. The R10 doesn't feature C-Log3 at all, but you still get HDR-PQ in 10-bit for color grading. There is also the Canon PowerShot V1 at around $849, compact camera with a built-in zoom lens, optical stabilization, and ND filter. Smaller sensor though. If you just want to grab one camera and go without swapping lenses, it's actually quite compelling for travel or vlogging. I have to say, I'm still eyeing it. But here's my honest take on this entire price range. Unless you're mostly shooting on a tripod or gimbal, your phone is probably already good enough, no joke, because the iPhone 15, 16 and 17 Pro especially are hard to distinguish from pro level cameras if you film in Apple Log, and the stabilization is often better than all those cameras we've mentioned here. And that said, if you do shoot on a tripod and want a better image, changeable lenses do make a difference. That's why I would say ideally get the ZV-E10 Mark II or the Fuji X-M5. The quality is on a professional level, and with affordable lenses like the Viltrox 13mm f1.4 or 27mm f1.2, you will get that background blur your phone can't match. The R50V is a great choice for live streams or long videos because it comes with a built-in fan, what all other cameras don't offer, so it's less likely to overheat because stereo recording for extended periods of time. And you also get a few third-party lenses now from Sigma for Canon's APS-C line, so the lens situation is also not super bad anymore. Let's come to mid-range cameras between $1,000 and $2,000. There I recommend the Fujifilm X-S20, Canon R8 and R6 Mark II, Sony a6700 and FX30 and A7 Mark IV, and the Panasonic S5 Mark II and S5 Mark II-X. This bracket is where things get exciting because you're stepping into cameras with much more pro-level features like sensor stabilization most of the time, and you're always getting 10-bit log recording, higher frame rate options and better handling. The differences really come down to IBIS quality. Panasonic usually wins here, autofocus reliability where Sony and Canon are top tier, whether you get open gate recording and lens ecosystem costs where Sony is generally the best and cheapest overall, while Canon RF lenses can cost quite a bit more. But let me break it down by what you actually need. I would say if you want the best all-around APS-C camera, the Sony a6700 at $1,498 is hard to beat. You get 4K 60 oversampled, which means super detailed footage, 4K 120 for slow motion with a crop, 10-bit 4:2 with S-Log3, LUT support, focus breathing compensation and IBIS plus active stabilization. And Sony's AI tracking autofocus is the best in the business, especially in low light, plus you have the biggest selection of affordable third-party lenses. The Sony FX30 is essentially the same camera, but in a video-first body. It handles better when rigged up, has better cooling for long recordings, and is just more comfortable for serious video work. So if you're doing run and gun, documentary work or interviews, the FX30 makes more sense. If you want compact size with amazing color, the Fujifilm X-S20 at $1,299 offers 6.2K open gate, 4K 60 with a small crop, Full HD at 240 frames per second, F-Log2 and 10-bit 4:2, and of course our loved Fujifilm simulations. It also has IBIS, though not as strong as Panasonic. The autofocus is good, but not Sony level. Again, use face tracking without eye tracking for best results. One downside though is that the lenses or the mount aren't well optimized for video, so you might notice focus or exposure stepping. But if you're after a very light and compact hybrid camera that punches well above its weight, this is actually fantastic. And if you want the best value full frame camera, the Canon R8 at only $1,199 is insane. You get 4K 60 oversampled with no crop, 10-bit 4:2 in C-Log3, focus breathing compensation, and honestly the image quality is identical to cameras that cost way more. I actually love this camera body because it has this deep grip that's super comfortable to hold. The catch? no IBIS, but most Canon RF lenses have stabilization built in, so it's manageable and can actually be an advantage for vlogging since you don't get Canon's corner wobble with this one, and you can adapt cheap used EF lenses with full autofocus, which is a huge advantage to reduce costs. It does also use Canon's smaller batteries, what does mean shorter record times, but you can manage it by just buying more batteries. They're not that expensive. And now the Canon R6 Mark II just dropped in price to $1,999, which means it also falls into this category now. And the thing is, it's essentially the same camera under the hood as the R8, same sensor, same image quality, same 4K 60 oversampled. The difference is that the R6 Mark II gives you a bigger, more professional body with better button layouts, a better viewfinder, and most importantly IBIS, so your videos are stabilized, though it can have some wobble issues with wide-angle lenses, but on longer focal lengths it's excellent. Canon's autofocus is also great and in some situations outperforms Sony, not in low light though, and it has the subject-only feature, what means that the focus does not jump to the background if it loses focus. That's pretty handy. Now here's where things get more interesting. The Sony a7 Mark IV just dropped to $1,997, putting it right at the top of this category alongside the R6 Mark II and Panasonic S5 Mark II X. And this is a big deal because the a7 Mark IV is one of the most popular hybrid cameras ever made. You get 33 megapixels full frame, 4K 30 oversampled from 7K, which is some of the sharpest 4K footage you can get. You also get 10-bit 42 and S-Log3, strong IBIS, fantastic autofocus, and the downside is that 4K 60 has a 1.5x crop. And versus the R6 Mark II, it has more resolution, a better low-light autofocus and better low-light in general, and more dynamic range. But the R6 Mark II has no 4K 60 crop, therefore what also many people value. And versus Panasonic, also better autofocus and more resolution and sharper 4K 30. But Panasonic has better IBIS, waveform monitoring, and OpenGate. Therefore, the a7 IV can overheat on very long recordings, though you can use APS-C crop mode to manage that. It's more of a hybrid camera than pure video, but if you want the best all-around with elite autofocus, it's hard to beat here. But let's come to our, in my opinion, best bang for the buck cameras, which are especially great if you want the best IBIS and video tools. Panasonic. The S5 Mark II at around $1,697 and the S5 Mark II X at $1,997 both offer 6.2K OpenGate, 4K oversampled from 6K, waveform monitoring, V-Log in 10-bit 42, Full HD at 180 frames per second, and a fan to prevent overheating. The IBIS on these cameras is the best out there in this price range. It's incredibly stable, almost gimbal-like. The S5 Mark II X adds ProRes recording and records to an external SSD plus raw output via HDMI, but for most people the regular S5 Mark II is powerful enough. I'm actually filming this right now on an S5 Mark II. The downsides: the autofocus is a bit behind Sony and Canon. It's not bad at all, it works reliably for everything you usually need, but Sony and Canon are just a bit better in certain situations, and the S5 Mark II has a 1.5x crop in 4K 60, same as the a7 Mark IV, but if IBIS and video tools are your priority and you can live with that crop, these are fantastic. And at $1,697, the S5 Mark II is $300 cheaper than both the R7 Mark IV and R6 Mark II, while giving you more video-focused features. Okay, let's come to the semi-professional category between $2,000 and $3,000. There we have the Nikon Z6 Mark III and the new Nikon ZR 6K cinema camera, Sony a7C Mark II and a7 Mark V, the new Canon R6 Mark III, and the not so new but still fantastic Fujifilm X-H2S. What do these have in common? Great 10-bit log codecs, great dynamic range, sensor stabilization, and 4K 120p with one exception. The price difference comes down to specific features that might matter a lot to you or not at all. Sometimes a camera from the mid-range category can actually beat those for certain uses, so pay attention to what you actually need. Key differences are sensor tech. Some have stacked sensors, whether you get only 4K or higher resolutions, OpenGate or RAW recording, port quality, and overall ecosystem costs. If you want a compact Sony hybrid with the latest features or almost latest features, the A7C Mark II at $2,198 is essentially the A7 Mark IV in a smaller travel-friendly body. Same 33 megapixel sensor, same 4K 30 oversampled from 7K, but 4K 60 has a crop at 1.5x and 10-bit 42 S-Log 3. The key upgrade is that you get an AI chip for better autofocus. It's more compact and lighter, fantastic for travel and run and gun, and it's great in low light. I've actually shot at ISO 12800 in the night with usable results. Downsides: no waveform monitoring, etc., micro HDMI, and of course fewer custom buttons. Weirdly, it's more expensive currently than the A7 IV. It's still fantastic if you want a small camera. But let's come to the brand new Sony A7 Mark V at $2,898, the most expensive and controversial camera here. The 33 megapixel partially stacked sensor delivers the highest dynamic range in this price bracket, matching medium format for photography, at least if you shoot with mechanical shutter. 4K 60 oversampled from the full 7K sensor with no crop at all, which is a big advantage over the A7 Mark IV and A7C Mark II if you hate 4K 60 crops. It also has 4K 120 frames per second in APS-C crop, and the heat management vastly improved because they somehow unified the chip, and that means that you can shoot 90 plus minutes in 4K 60 continuous. The catch: it doesn't let you record in 7K or OpenGate, so it's limited to 4K max. If you need higher resolution for cropping in post or vertical and horizontal content from the same footage, this is clearly not the camera for you. But if 4K is all you need and you value best image quality, dynamic range, zero 4K 60 crop, amazing autofocus, and best lens ecosystem, the A7 V is probably the best hybrid here. Also, the screen flips in all directions, which is great, but Sony didn't give it the full A9 Mark III style body. So in summary, A7C Mark II for compact travel, A7 Mark V for best image quality if 4K is enough, and remember, the A7 Mark IV and S5 Mark II from Panasonic are also excellent if you want to save some money. So let's come to Canon and the brand new R6 Mark III at $2,799. You get 4K 60 oversampled from 7K with no crop, full HD at 180 FPS, great dynamic range with C-Log 2, 10-bit 42, and strong stabilization unless you shoot wide angle. There are the typical Canon wobbles. Canon's color science is beautiful, and the autofocus has this cool detect only feature where if it loses your face, it won't hunt for the background, it just stays put. It's also well built with a comfortable grip, and the R6 Mark III uses the same sensor as Canon's C50 cinema camera, though dynamic range appears slightly lower than the C50. So if you want absolute best video quality, Canon offers the C50 wins, but the C50 doesn't have IBIS, and that's why for most people the R6 Mark III is likely the sweet spot. The only downside really is that Canon RF lenses are expensive, no affordable third-party full-frame options are there, but you can adapt EF lenses with full autofocus for cheaper used glass, and Canon recently released the more affordable f1.4 VCM line, 16-28 and 28-70 f2.8 zooms, and the 45mm f1.2, so the lineup is definitely improving. Overall, I think that if you're in the Canon system and want a modern hybrid that does it all, the R6 Mark III is an excellent choice, and maybe even the best hybrid below $3,000, depending on what you value about a camera. But let's come to Nikon, as they made a big move with the new Tiny ZR 6K cinema camera at just $2,196. It's fascinating and, in my opinion, shares the best bang for the buck title with the Panasonic S5 Mark II. It shoots 6K full frame with Red RAW, NRAW, ProRes RAW, and also normal codecs, by the way. It goes up to 6K 60 frames per second, 4K 120 and 1080p 240. It has IBIS, deep learning subject tracking and LUT loading, and it has a huge 4-inch screen, what makes it much better to judge your footage and framing. No other hybrid has such a big one. The main trade-offs are that it's built for cinema file workflows, so you will have massive files when you're shooting RAW, and only a micro HDMI port, and while the Red RAW looks amazing, the normal HEVC 10-bit N-Log you likely end up shooting shooting most of the time because the files are just smaller, isn't actually that special compared to other camera. It's definitely not bad though. Also, the body is super small, what can be good, but it's not that ergonomic and you have less customizable buttons, what I personally value a lot. But if you want raw recording and fantastic video features in a small package for an affordable price, this is incredible value. And also, if you're a Nikon shooter and want a more traditional hybrid camera, the Z6 Mark III sits in the mid 2K range with NRAW internal recording, 10-bit N-Log, 4K high frame rate options up to 120p, solid IBIS and modern Nikon autofocus. Plus you get the Nikon adapter advantage, FTZ for old Nikon glass, plus third-party adapters for Canon EF and even Sony E-mount lenses. However, I did a quick test with this camera as some people complained that I did not mention it in my last best cameras video. And I have to say that I'm not impressed by the dynamic range, and that's also the reason why I'm personally not a big fan of it. I think they should put the ZR tag into the Z6 Mark III body and they would have a powerhouse of a camera, because the body of the Z6 Mark III is actually quite nice. So not a bad camera, you can capture great shots with it and it has powerful video features, yes, but you know, I'm a perfectionist. And yes, I can't end this part without mentioning the Fujifilm X-H2S. Yes, it's an APS-C camera at now $2,899, which is still pretty expensive, but it's an absolute beast with the best video quality I've personally shot in every hybrid body. It has a stacked sensor, which means virtually no rolling shutter, shoots 4K 60 without a crop, 4K 120 with a crop, 6.2K open gate, and supports ProRes recording internally on CFast Express cards. The dynamic range is incredibly good, and Fuji's film simulations gives you a cinematic look right out of camera. F-Log 2 is also fantastic, and the autofocus is good, but not Sony or Canon level. Again, turn eye tracking off and use face tracking for best results, but well, you will still get some focus and exposure stepping. But if autofocus isn't your top priority and you value image quality and dynamic range, this could still be the best option in this price range. I would say it's especially interesting for professional filmmakers who are used to manual focus anyway, because aside from that, it's cinema camera level, and I'm not joking. And finally, let's look at professional cameras above $3,000. Here's the lineup: Nikon Z8, Sony A1 Mark II, A9 Mark III, A7S III and FX3, Canon R5 Mark II and C50, and of course Panasonic S1 Mark II and S1R Mark II. I'm not going too in-depth here because professionals usually know what they need, but I will give you the quick rundown. What do these cameras have in common? Honestly, everything here is good enough to be the camera, not the excuse. The differences come down to sensor technology, stacked or global shutter, whether you need 8K or RAW, ecosystems, and sometimes it really just comes down to which brand you're already invested in or simply which one you like. If you want the probably best value professional hybrid, the Nikon Z8 at around $3,497 is essentially a compact Z9. You get a 45 megapixel stacked sensor, 8K recording, 4K high frame rates, solid IBIS, N-Log and full-size HDMI. The autofocus is very capable, though still usually behind Sony and Canon for the stickiest tracking. So there's nothing negative to say really, aside from the weight, what is a bit chunkier than the competition, but if that's not an issue, go for it. And if you want Sony's ultimate hybrid, the brand new A1 Mark II at $6,998 has a 50 megapixel stacked sensor, 8K recording, 4K 120, 10-bit 42 S-Log 3 and Sony's flagship autofocus tracking. It's also incredible for photography with 30 raw photos per second. The downside is that it lacks some video-centric features like open gate or waveform monitoring, and you don't get oversampled 4K internally. You would have to shoot 8K and don't scale it in post, which means massive file sizes. So while it can produce fantastic video, it's definitely a photography first camera, and I would say all competitors in this price range do offer you more bang for the buck when it comes to video. If you shoot fast action and you need zero rolling shutter, the Sony A9 Mark III at $5,998 is the one to go, as it has a global shutter. That means no rolling shutter at all, even on fast moving subjects. It shoots 4K 60 oversampled and 4K 120 subsampled. It has state-of-the-art autofocus, a full-size HDMI port, and Sony's amazing flip-out screen that goes in all directions. It's perfect for video and action photography. Therefore, it has a bit lower dynamic range and more noise in the shadows. What I often found causes a bit more work in post, plus the base ISO in S-Log3 is 2000, so you will need a 6 to 9 stop ND filter basically all the time when shooting outside. If you prioritize low light and simple reliability, the A7S III at around $3,148 has a 12 megapixel sensor built for video. It shoots 4K 120, 10-bit42 S-Log3 and is incredible in low light. It's already a bit older, but still a very solid choice, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And if you want a dedicated video body, the Sony FX3 at around $3,659 is essentially the A7S III in a cinema body. You get better cooling, better reliability, and handling that's built for rigging up cameras. So if you're a dedicated video shooter, the FX3 makes more sense than the hybrid bodies. For Canon, both the R5 Mark II and C50 at $3,899 are great options depending on your needs. The R5 Mark II has a 45 megapixel stacked sensor, shoots 8K 60 RAW internally, 4K 30 oversampled, 4K 60 and 120 subsampled, and it has C-Log2 in 10-bit42, a huge upgrade from C-Log3 for dynamic range in my opinion. It also has excellent autofocus, IBIS, though it wobbles on wide angles, and full-size HDMI. I overall think it's the best hybrid for photo and video in my opinion. And then there's the C50, that's Canon's smallest cinema camera with a 32 megapixel sensor, 7K 60 cinema raw light, 7K open gate recording, a dual base ISO of 800 and 6400, full width 4K 120, oversampled 4K 60 and a detachable XLR top handle, but no IBIS and no electronic viewfinder. It's pure video first. It can also shoot photos, but it's clearly a dedicated video camera, not a real hybrid. So if you're a hybrid shooter, go for the R5 Mark II or R6 Mark III if you need IBIS, high-res photo and video flexibility. And I think in that price range, the higher lens costs are not really an issue because you're most likely a working professional. And finally, Panasonic, the S1 Mark II and S1R2 at around $3,200 are probably the best value cameras in that price range. You get Panasonic's incredible monitoring tools, waveform, vector scope, anamorphic, stabilization, open gate recording, and pretty strong codecs. The autofocus is much improved, but still a bit behind Sony and Canon, depending on what you shoot. The main difference is the resolution. The S1R Mark II gives you 44 megapixels and 8K, while the S1 Mark II only 24 megapixels, but therefore either more dynamic range or less rolling shutter, what you can choose in the menu. And what I personally find most impressive is really the cropless IBIS. Like, that is so close to a gimbal that I would say these two cameras are the best one you can get as a professional vlogging or handheld camera. But that also leads me to the big downside, what is in my opinion the lens ecosystem. It's not bad and you will likely be okay, but there is, for example, now 16-35 2.8, and tele lenses such as the 70-200 f2.8 options are on the heavy side compared to the competition. So amazing cameras for many people, but look first what lenses you need and what's available. So let's wrap this up with my personal recommendations for each category. For entry level, I would go with the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II for most people because it has the best specs overall and the best lens ecosystem. That said, I actually grabbed the Fujifilm X-M5 just for fun because I love retro style Fuji cameras and this one is actually quite special. In the mid-range, I would pick the Sony a6700 or FX30 for APS-C, depending on whether you want a hybrid or a video-centric body. Same reasons as the ZV-E10 Mark II. And for full frame, the Panasonic S5 Mark II is incredibly strong for video with 6.2 open gate and the best IBIS. But honestly, the Canon R8 at just $1,199 is crazy good value too. For a semi-professional, it really comes down to what features matter most to you. The Canon R6 Mark III is excellent as it feels like the most complete hybrid to me. The Nikon Nikon ZR is fascinating if you need raw recording workflows in a small body, and the Sony a7 Mark V has the absolute best image quality and dynamic range in this price range, but you're limited to 4K maximum resolution, so you decide. And in the professional category, I actually shot with the Sony a9 Mark III for a long time, and it's a fantastic camera with a global shutter, amazing autofocus and great build quality, but I found it frustrating that Sony doesn't add 6K resolution or open gate recording to this camera, even though it's technically capable. So I finally switched to the Canon R5 Mark II, but for different reasons. If you want to know more about that decision, I made a whole video about why I switched from Sony to Canon. I will link it here in the corner, but honestly, in this professional price range, it really depends on your ecosystem. So that's it. I hope this video helps you find the right camera for your needs. Leave me a thumbs up if you found it useful. Consider subscribing, and I will see you in upcoming videos.